So we have stomach. So stomach has, let's look at the anatomy first. So we have fundus. This is the bulge area. We have cardiac end. And then we have body of the stomach. We have antrum. And then here there is a narrowing, which is called pyloric sphincter. And then after that, duodenum start. So there are different types of cells in the stomach. So in the body of the stomach, there are two main types of cell you will see. So there are parietal cell, two main types of cell, and then there are chief cells. And then in the antrum, there are again different types of cells. Number one, there are G cells. Second, mucosal cells or mucous cells. There are D cells. Then once we pass beyond pyloric sphincter, there are I cells, S cells, K cells, so these are the most common types of cells. We are looking at the anatomy and physiology of the stomach, and we'll discuss their function one by one. So let's start with parietal cells. So parietal cells, they are responsible for the formation of HCl. Chief cells, they are responsible for the production of pepsinogen. G cells, they are responsible for the production of gastrin. So let's say when the stomach acid is low, the G cell will be stimulated. They will produce gastrin, and it will enter into the blood, and it will stimulate parietal cells to secrete HCl. Parietal cells, the G cells, the gastrin, it can also stimulate enterochromaffin-like cells, which will secrete histamine, and histamine can also stimulate acid production. Parietal cells, they are also responsible for the formation of intrinsic factor. An intrinsic factor is responsible for B12 absorption in the ileum. Now, how G cells are stimulated? So G cells are stimulated by, so I'll remove this a little bit. They are stimulated by decrease acid, talking about G cell stimulation, by decrease acid, stomach distension. So when we are eating, stomach will be distended, that will stimulate G cells, so gastrin will be released, stimulate parietal cells, secrete acid, stomach distension. Third, because they are responsible for the formation of acid, G cell, gastrin, indirectly. So let's say if the environment is alkaline, that will also stimulate G cells. 4, vagal stimulation. Parasympathetic stimulation can also activate G cells. So next is, what is the action of G cell? What is the function of G cell. G cell is responsible for increased acid, like we discussed. It can also cause growth of gastric mucosa. It can cause hyperplasia, growth of gastric mucosa, increased gastric mucosal growth, and it can also stimulate gastric motility. It can increase motility, gastric motility. So let's say if someone is taking PPI, what will happen to gastrin? Because PPI, proton pump inhibitor, will inhibit acid in the stomach. So that will result in increased gastrin level in the body. And let's say if someone has chronic atrophic gastritis, so increased gastrin can be caused by PPI, atrophic gastritis. So atrophic gastritis will result in loss of parietal cell. So when there is loss of parietal cell, decreased acid. When acid is decreased, then gastrin will be high. Atrophic gastritis. And then Zollinger-Ellison syndrome can also cause. So basically, there is a tumor called gastrinoma, which will result in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Gastrinoma will produce increased gastrin level. Next is mucous cells. So mucous cells are here. So the function is simple. They are responsible for the production of mucus. Neutralize acid a little bit. Produce mucus. Simple function. Next is D cells. So what is the function of D cell? D cell, basically they produce somatostatin. Somatostatin. The function of the somatostatin is all inhibitory. If you cannot remember anything, whenever you see somatostatin, it just inhibit everything. Let's see one by one. Decrease gastric acid, decrease pancreatic secretion. Third, decrease hormonal secretion. Sometimes it decreases gallbladder contraction too. Basically inhibit everything. This is the function of D cell. D cell stimulate, D cell form somatostatin, and G cell, mucous cell, and D cell, they are present in antrum of the stomach. So next is eye cells. What is the function of eye cell? Eye cell produces cholecystokinin. Eye cells stimulate, produce cholecystokinin. And what is the function of cholecystokinin? One common function we all know is it increases the contraction of gallbladder. Second, it increases pancreatic secretion. So pancreatic secretion basically bicarb. Third, it decreases gastric emptying. Why? Because it gives some time to digest the food content. 4, it increases sphincter of Oddi contraction. Again, function of the cholecystokinin is released from the eye cells, increase gallbladder contraction, increase pancreatic secretion, decrease gastric emptying to digest the food, and then increase sphincter of Oddi contraction. Cholecystokinin is increased by fatty food. Next is S cells. S cells secrete secretin. The main function of the secretin is it acts on the pancreas, which increase bicarb secretion. That's the main function of the secretin. So secretin is increased because it is producing bicarb. That's the function of S cells. So let's say if there is more acid near the secretin cells, the bicarb secretion will increase. So the stimulus for S cell will be acid in that area. And the bicarb release will help to neutralize the acid if it is too much there. Next is K cells. K cells. What is the function of K cell? It produces gastric inhibitory peptide. K cell produce gastric inhibitory peptide, also called glucose dependent insulinotropic peptide. What is the function of K cell? It decreases acid secretion, gastric acid secretion. And then sometimes it also stimulates insulin release. How it is produced? By fatty acid in that area. When we move forward to small intestine, so if we move forward from this point onward, the small intestine will produce mortellin. There is a hormone produced by small intestine is called mortellin. Function of the mortellin is in increased mortality, usually produced in fasting state, and mortellin can be increased by erythromycin. So at this point, there is a lower esophageal sphincter between esophagus and the stomach, lower esophageal sphincter. So at this point, there is a transmitter called nitric oxide which plays its role. It increases smooth muscle relaxation and causes relaxation of lower esophageal sphincter during peristalsis. If we lost nitric oxide, that will increase the tone of lower esophageal sphincter, which can happen in eclasia. One of the abnormality can be nitric oxide. The exact etiology is not fully clear. There is another hormone which is called ghrelin. Ghrelin. So this hormone is produced by stomach. It increases appetite. So let's say if someone is fasting, their appetite will increase, so ghrelin level will go up, and the level will go down if someone's stomach is full with food. So this hormone is increased in a condition called Prader-Willi syndrome. Increase in Prader-Willi syndrome, and let's say if someone has a gastric bypass, there is no stomach, no ghrelin. Okay, so this is stomach anatomy and physiology. Different types of cells, their function, their regulation. It's important. If you know this, you can understand, you can easily do pharmacology of the stomach. Because let me give you an example. So let's say on the same image. So let's say if you are using antacid, you have to neutralize the acid. So antacid will be mag oxide, mag sulfate, aluminium hydroxide. So second drug will be PPI. PPI will inhibit the parietal cell by hydrogen potassium ATPase pump, which decrease production of HCl from the parietal cells. So let's say if there's an ulcer in the stomach, you can use sucralfate. So there is an ulcer, sucralfate you can use, which will bind to the ulcer base and decrease acid irritation to the ulcer. It's another drug. So if you know the physiology and anatomy, you can easily do pharmacology at the same time. So if you guys are drawing, I'll give you like a couple of minutes and then we can go on to our next topic before the break.